Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Technomancy and Tea, written by Squigglestorystudios. The young orc looked up in awe. It was everything the wandering sage had said, and more. A technomancer's mansion atop a mountain, a shimmering castle of metal and lightning. Clouds of steam poured from giant chimneys and joined its brethren in the heavens, while the walls sparkled with thousands of tiny lights, like stars in the night sky. He held onto his book tightly, the leather-bound volume he held dearly to his chest. He dared to approach the sacred halls. Soldiers of metal stood at attention guarding the open gates. Disciplined, immortal warriors stood their ground, their armored shells draped in red tunics, even though they would not feel the cold. The orc pulled back his hood and walked up to the immortals. "Son of Steel," he hailed them, "I have come to speak to the Technomancer, if they will grant me an audience." The warriors turned their head in unison, bodies and souls shifting in time as though they all shared the same soul. Stomp, stomp, stomp. The crowd's boots crunched on the snow that covered the mountain's peak. They stood before the orc, dwarfing him with their size. Before the unseen eyes behind their helms glowed a pale blue. A spirit materialized before the young orc, a face that was both human and not human. "Oh, a visitor," the spirit chuckled. "I don't get many of visitors these days, just the curious and the broken." Her voice was like incense that lingered in the air, sweet and smoky. "I would be the curious." The young one nodded his head. He held up the tome in his hands for the pale blue spirit to see. "A sage spoke of the machine gods. I wish to know more." The spirit cackled. "Oh, dearest me, child, please come in from the cold. You'll be of no worth to either of us if your flesh falls off to the frost." The spirit vanished, and the eyes of the warriors grew dim. They turned to escort him inside the monument of wires and gears. The building itself must have been alive, for the orc could feel the pulsating heat from the columns. He need not wear his furs inside. He could scarcely believe the buildings in front of him was real. Inside the arched gates of coiled metal was a cathedral of glass and light. A sparkling crystal chandelier shimmered above him. The walls were covered in mirrors to other worlds. Creatures created of gears buzzed through the air like bees, attending to their duties with as much vigor. The steel guards brought the orc past many wonders until they reached the center of the manor, and to the Technomancer herself. She dangled from the ceiling, sitting like a mother spider tangled within a million fine threads. 7 wings of steel flourished and folded from her elegant body as she descended from the nest. Eyes in robes of red, faces as white and as smooth as porcelain, and a voice that spoke of ancient knowledge. "Welcome, young one," the Technomancer greeted. "May I ask your name?" "Guile. My name is Guile," he answered, trying to muster confidence that he had when starting his trek up the mountainside. "Ooh," an amused, soft cackle escaped the old one. "What memories you have returned to me." She appeared to be lost in thought for a moment before returning her eerie, glowing eyes to his presence. "And in return for such precious gift, I shall grant you my own name. You may call me Theresa." "Theresa," Guile repeated, stunned as she did not have a dozen titles beforehand. The Technomancer nodded her head slowly. "Now then, would you care for some tea?" she offered. Yes, thank you." Guile accepted startled. He thought that he would have to beg and prove his worth to the ancient sage. He was not expecting to be welcomed so warmly. Guile's large ears picked up the soft hum of machinery. Clicks and hisses echoed in the halls as Theresa pulled herself from her enormous body of wires. 4 thin legs, each segment Guile's own height, tapped the floor with an unnatural grace. A human body dangled from the middle. Blood-red robes concealed her form from him. "This way, if you please. I have some surroundings you might be more comfortable with." The halls of light and glass soon gave way to more familiar things. Wood, stone, cotton, wax candle lights, and the smell of fresh ink and paper. A library, more grand than any Guile had the pleasure of basking in, was hidden away within the Technomancer's manor. 2 armchairs sat before a roaring fire of light, a wooden table beside them. Theresa offered the orc a seat. He almost couldn't. His feet and heart wanted to carry him to the endless shelves of knowledge and bury his face within the pages. Theresa lowered herself into a vacant chair. Human hands folded within her lap as an elegant spider legs acted as attendants. "Now then, Guile," she smiled at the pronunciation of his name. "A sage spoke to you of the machine gods, and you wish to know more." Tendrils reached out to the mantle of the fireplace. An iron pot pulled from the shelf to be filled with water, poured from a silver tap that decorated the mantle. Giles' brown eyes followed the silver pipes up the mantel and into the mess of cables that made up the halls. How much more do you actually seek? All of it, Guile replied, his gaze still following the maze of pipes. I wish to know about the machine god, the fall of the old gods to the new and magic humanity brought with them. Larissa's mechanical legs hung in the kettle over the fire, while her human hands drew the drawers of the table. They pulled from its depths a ceramic teapot that would have found its home in a simple orc house, a green surface painted with pink petals. All of it? I do hope you are not in a hurry. A century tale cannot be told in a night, Larissa stated. Guile watched as the technomancer's hands lifted the teapot's lid. Her fleshy hand was old and withered. Rings of gold banded each finger. Runes of his people, the elves and the others were carved into them, but he left his questions fall to the wayside. He had his entire life to ask questions, but now he would listen. He looked to his own hands, green skin stained with ink, scratched with quill lines and manicured claws. A single gold band wrapped around his thumb, the mark of a scholar of Gaia. I have as long as your patience lasts with me, he replied. Oh, Larissa laughed. You're quite the charmer, but I believe that we have until your mind drifts to the realms of sleep. The spider legs dropped petals and herbs into the pot, retrieving the kettle from the fire and pouring the hot water into the container. The sweet scent of rose and peaches filled the room just as the lid went on the pot. Now then, she smiled, returning her hands to her lap. Shall I start at the beginning? Story number 2. Humans are destroying the terraforming industry, written by Admiral Marsupial III. Ulik was happy. He was president of the Biosphere Galactic, and that made him as powerful as, and in the equal of, any head of state from any galactic empire. But those fucking humans had ruined everything. Biosphere Galactic was the largest corporation in the history of the galaxy. It had existed for 46,000 years and had an income equivalent to 1,000 entire planets, the largest spaceborne navy of any organization or entity in history, the third biggest army and navy, and had literally shaped life on innumerable worlds across the entire Milky Way. Terraforming was the most lucrative and profitable business in the galaxy, and what 99.9% of people didn't know was it was that lucrative because it was much easier than people realized. Each species had its own definition of what makes a planet suitable for settlement. The Giateur said that you needed to be able to form a balanced and sustainable ecosystem with the existing life forms and wouldn't declare a planet as confirmed for settlement until at least 50 years after first colonization. The Null had their 1,625 checks of habitability, things such as gravity, radiation levels, day-to-night percentage, planetary spin speed, maximum annual temperature variations, etc. The Uta had a more pragmatic view. Could a colony of sufficient size to avoid inbreeding support itself of natural resources if their technology failed and they found themselves isolated, and so on and so on. The general idea being that each species had a massive list of requirements before a planet was capable of settlement. This meant that a vast majority of life-sustaining planets weren't suitable for settlement when discovered, and terraforming mostly consisted of minor adjustments to planets that already had working ecosystems, or repairing those that had suffered major ecological events. Sure, they could bring life to barren rocks, but it was that much effort, and there were that many almost habitable worlds that it only really happened if the planet allowed you to see some spectacular natural phenomena that the travel industry would milk and build resorts and bring the rich travelers. Maybe what they did wasn't true terraforming, but the name still carried enough mystique that they could charge massive margins, and they did by far the best work of anyone, so the orders were lined up for the next 6 years with waiting lists of projects after that. Yes, terraforming was the best business in the galaxy to have a monopoly on, the key word being was. Now Ulik was no longer happy, and was no longer the equal of the galactic heads of state. Now, he was the leader of a flaming pile of catastrophic crap that was the biggest corporate collapse that would ever happen in the Milky Way. And it was all the stupid, hairless, mentally deficient, slobbering apes' fault. No one's going to pay time and money for terraforming when you can sell the planet to the species whose only conditions for settlement are, can I stand naked outside for 30 minutes on at least one point of the planet without dying? And when that species is so hard to kill, he was sure their existence was punishment for some forgotten time, horrific genocide he inflicted on innocent pacifists in a previous life. Ulik was left in a position where he needed about 200 civilized planets to get hit by asteroids, or he was fecked. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.